Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Paul, for being with us. I still remember that we met the first time at the travel payments conference in Canada. And I was back then still a founder of a company in Israel. And now I am Atlantic Fintech in Canada, and I'm inviting you to speak about travel payments so many years after that. So it's incredible how things come together and things work at the end. And you have a very comprehensive background in payments technologies from global leaders like Ingenico, and for many years you are leading the sector of travel payments that has its own very specialized providers, systems, and regulations. And I think that many fintech entrepreneurs, from my experience, are not aware of this special segment and how much it represents or the potential of it for solutions. So I'm really happy to have you today, and thank you. And please welcome, and you are here invited to lead the show.
Okay. Thank you so much, Alicia, for the invitation, and good to reconnect after all those years. And thank you for joining. Travel payments, it's an interesting topic, very complex topic. It's pretty much the story of my life. And I see that Carla is just joining us, or last week in Lisbon. So it's a bit of a challenge. It says here also travel payments, challenge and opportunity, but to come up with a program for 1 hour. But I'm going to do my best to at least give the audience some background on what the industry looks like, what the complexities are, and also what's coming, what are the innovations. I don't have a real good feel of who's in the audience and what their backgrounds are. So I'm just assuming that you have some background in payments and maybe also somewhat background in travel industry, so that I can skip the real 101 piece and move more into the details. So my name is Paul van Alfen, and I've been active in travel payments, airline and travel payments for the last 20 plus years. On the vendor side, but also working nowadays as consultant with airlines and online travel agencies as well on their payment strategy and their vendor selection, for instance. So let's get started. Always have to do it like this. Here we go. So the agenda for today is put together by Alicia and the team. We're going to have a bit of a holistic, wider look at the landscape, at what are the challenges. If it's around accepting card payments, about credit risk, but also when there is a travel intermediary in the middle, a travel agency, a tour operator, a platform, what does it look like from a payment perspective? What's the role of alternative form of payments? What's payment orchestration? How important is that in accepting payments in travel? And then at the end, I can't skip those two topics, because if I look at what's top of mind at the events this year, it's all about agentic AI and stablecoins. So I just want to briefly touch on that as well. So let's get started. This is always my starting point. Travel is per definition seen as high risk. Why? Because typically, payment is taken at the time of booking, and the delivery of the service, the journey, the flight, the cruise, to a lesser extent the hotel stay, but the package that you book is delivered 3 months, 6 months, quite a long period later, right? So if something happens to the supplier, if it's the airline, if it's the travel agency, and the service not been delivered yet, and then there is a credit risk involved. And I always like the quote by Richard Branson as well. If you want to become a millionaire, start an airline as a billionaire. And if you look at the statistic by IATA, it is a coming and going of airlines. Typically, smaller regional airlines suffer to scale and to remain afloat, if you can call it like that, or up in the air. But you do see that the number of airline bankruptcies, insolvencies, that airlines that ceased operations has reduced somewhat, but there's still also quite a lot coming up. Again, those are mainly smaller recent ones. And unfortunately, Canada has a bit of a history there as well. I think there's been some recent situations there as well. And that's always in the back of the acquirer's mind, but also, for instance, the card scheme's mind, when they allow acceptance of card payments, reversible payments in general. For travel, there's always a lot of scrutiny there around credit risk. We'll come to that later as well. Travel payments. I get the question like, can you visualize the landscape of travel payments? And I go, that's an interesting one. And I chose basically it's inspired by the tube in London, the London Metro. In the middle, if you've been to London, you use the tube, you know that that's the circle line, the yellow line, that's the travel intermediaries, but around it, there are very many different lines and different stops that play a role. And if maybe we start on the left-hand side, there's a whole range of channels, obviously online, but also more traditional, like brick and mortar, but also, mobile, obviously. And for instance, and we'll come to that later as well, the latest kid on the block, AI agents, let's see how that materializes. Obviously, there are many, many different suppliers. I mean, we're talking about airlines, maybe online travel agencies, but it is a wide group, right? There's from transportation to mobility, to car rental, to cruise, to excursions, hostels. In the end, it's a multi-billion, trillion industry worldwide that's involved in travel, and that means that there's a lot of complexity per se. Obviously, there are direct sales, there are consumer payments, but there are also B2B payments. So if you book directly with a supplier, an airline, a car rental company, a cruise line, then obviously you pay that supplier directly. But in let's say probably more than half of bookings made are actually done with a party in the middle, one or multiple, by the way. It could be, from the consumer booking to the end supplier delivering. There could be multiple steps in there, and it also creates complexity in booking reservations, but definitely also on the payment side. Obviously, there are payment processes involved. Now, some of them are, let's say, more agnostic. They could be applied to retail as well, and others are very industry specific, airline specific, hospitality specific. How do you pay in a hotel, for instance? You probably recognize that if you enter a hotel, you made a reservation, that you're asked to provide your card, that an authorization is done to hold money in case you make use of facilities in the hotel, the bar, the spa, etc. And when you check out, then the final amount is taken from that reservation, and the rest is released. But there are quite a lot of specific use cases for the travel industry across the different suppliers and channels. Technology plays an important role. Technology that goes back, by the way, probably sometimes 40, 50 years. So there's a lot of legacy technology. And the difficulty of changing that is a huge scale that the industry basically represents, right? It's global, and there's massive amounts moving, from one side to the other. So it's not easy to make those changes. Standardization, regulations, it's all required to guide it in a proper way. Where another maybe line here or an angle to this is like, you have leisure travel and corporate travel, and the payment processes are actually quite different. If you book on behalf of a company, if you're a staff member booking, then the process is quite different than if you would be an end customer, booking for your leisure trip. Different settings, different rules, different forms of payment as well. Corporate cards, for instance. So in the end, I mean, too much to explain today, but there's a lot of things that come together. And it also means that if you're as a participant in the travel payment value chain, that you really have to do your homework, that you really have to invest in understanding the complexities, the dependencies, the partners upstream and downstream. There's a lot of dependencies to work with. By the way, I think we're with a relatively small group, so if there is a question, please raise your hand or even open the mic if you feel comfortable with that. I don't mind. So if we then move on to the leisure side, the customer payment side, what forms of payments are commonly used in the travel space for airlines, for hotels, for online travel agencies, for instance, for tour operators? Well, the short answer is it differs very much, based on the local culture. And if you're in North America, then it will be heavily skewed towards cards, credit cards, predominantly, but also, for instance, PayPal, and also some new wallets are coming up. If you're in LATAM, then you might want to pay in installments, or you even want to pay in cash, or with bank account to account, with Pix, for instance, in Brazil, or you might want to use your neobank like NewPay to do that from a kind of a neobank super app. You see that in Asia, Southeast Asia, very fragmented, very many different wallets, local wallets. UPI in India, for instance, is massive as a form of payment. Maybe not so much yet in travel, but it's definitely an important player there. Obviously in China with Alipay, WeChat Pay. You see that, for instance, in Africa, a lot of this is based on mobile wallets. And in Europe, it's a mix of cards, of buy now, pay later, for instance, of account to account. But the bottom line is, and that's also the line at the bottom here, coincidentally, is that the major card schemes, the global card schemes, are still very dominant. I think it's safe to say that in travel, probably 80 worldwide, in local differences do apply, but 85%, 85 to 90% is still paid with, Visa, Mastercard, American Express, and then to maybe a smaller extent, overall with Discover, Diners Club, BCB, and UnionPay. But overall, that's still the most common way to do it. Why is that? Obviously, you pay in advance, so the fact that you get some credit is definitely helpful. By the way, all the systems in the travel industry are originally based on cards, so that's the most common way to move money around. But also, for instance, protection against that non-delivery of service is an important one. But also rewards, obviously, and cashbacks and loyalty points, and insurances that are built into card products. So that does play an important role for travel. So sometimes it's, let's say, they're more heavily represented than in other verticals. You see that in travel because of the characteristics of basically the items that you purchase. Okay. So moving on. As you saw on the metro map, on the tube map, there's quite a lot of different suppliers. And if you group them together in like sub-verticals, you could say airlines, online travel agencies, it's for booking flights or booking hotels. Those are the two major ones. Booking directly with a hotel or a hotel chain, booking a cruise directly with the cruise line, or maybe through a tour operator, and more like packaging tour operators. They do have different characteristics when it comes to accepting payments. And what I try to do here with this like spider diagram is, okay, if you look at the main characteristics, the average transaction value at the top, the complexity of the number of channels being used, the reliance on cards, the success of alternative payment methods, APMs, the total cost for accepting payments, how cross-border is that particular sub-vertical, and how important is credit risk and fraud risk. And if you then see that an airline is quite different from a hotel. Why? An airline, you pay fully in advance at the time of booking. And to a large degree, the hotel, you pay at either check-in or check-out. So that means that it's a completely different process, to complete different timeline. That has quite some impact on the way payments are processed. The tour operator typically takes an advance payment, at the time of booking, maybe 1 or 2 weeks after the time of booking, and then the remainder, or even more payments in the middle, but the remainder a number of weeks before departure. Well, if you book in January for a trip in September, that makes quite a difference in the process flow. Obviously, the transaction values to operators, they package. Cruise lines are typically also more expensive, flights versus hotels. So it's not a one size fits all. That's pretty much what I'm saying here. We won't go into too much detail on fraud, but obviously some of these services, are more targeted by fraudsters and others, right? If you have to identify yourself and you check into a hotel versus you go through and you have an e-ticket for an airline. Typically, there's differences in what the street value is of these kind of services. Airlines are typically the most targeted for fraud, followed by online travel agencies that book flights, for instance, and the others to a lesser degree. Okay, let's move on. Going back to the forms of payment, and what's very important in payments in general, but definitely in travel, is that the form of payment needs to be seen from both the customer perspective and from the merchant perspective. What we see a lot in the industry is that some forms of payments are promoted because they serve one of the two. And to a certain extent, it's a zero-sum game. One wins, one loses. You see that with cards. That's where typically the customer wins, and the merchant has to pay a relatively high fee for that. But for instance, with account to account, that's like risk-free and very cost-friendly for the merchant, but it doesn't add any value or not a lot of value for the customer, right? So, and what I try to do here is more like get a bit of feel of, hey, how do they compare, and what are the different elements that play a role in that. So, convenience. So, how easy is it to check out? Are you protected in case something happens? The next pandemic, hopefully not, but a disruption, a flight canceled, a bankruptcy of an individual supplier. Is there a dispute process? Can you reverse the transaction in a structured and fast way or not at all? And that does play a role if you pay in January for something that will have to materialize in, let's say, August or September in the Northern Hemisphere. That's very common with the summer holidays. Obviously, incentive, what drives the customer to select that form of payment. I always use the example of American Express. You can say a lot about American Express, but they do offer a lot of incentives to their cardholders, right? At the expense of the merchant, but from a customer perspective, that's a strong feature. The credit, what we've seen, and we'll come to that in a bit as well, is that buy now, pay later has become a quite successful form of payment in the travel industry. Also, obviously, because you book quite far in advance typically. And it's quite a high amount. So if you need to you need to pay that up front, then and you have an option to pay that over time. That is quite an interesting option for customers. We see that obviously in the US, in Canada, but also in Europe and other regions as well. And the cost as well, like is there a direct cost for the customer? In some cases, airlines or other merchants, they surcharge certain cards where that's allowed. Like in the European Union, you're allowed to surcharge corporate cards, but not consumer cards. So the difference very much per country or per region, what's possible there. But that's definitely also something that plays a role. Okay, if there are no questions, I'll continue. We already explained a little bit about the rise of, if I group them together, I call them book now, pay later, because it's not all buy now, pay later technically. And if you look at this overview, then you see that there are actually, if you really list them all, there's quite a lot of options out there where the customer either pays over time, earlier or later, in multiple installments, before checkout, after, or before checkout, after checkout, before the trip starts, etc. That's the timeline you see at the top. And you see some of the names of the vendors. It's just random examples of vendors that play in that space. But what I've seen is that obviously buy now, pay later, where a credit check is done and credit is provided, already for the last couple of years has become quite successful. And you see that being rolled out by more and more players. And for instance, Pay in 4, PayPal is quite successful with that, especially if it's no interest. And very important, and you see that in the timeline in the middle and on the right-hand side is when is the travel merchant, the merchant in general, when are they paid in full? because ideally, you don't want the merchant to receive the money later because they are used to getting that upfront as well. But also they don't want to disrupt their reconciliation processes. So if the buy now, pay later provider can take on the role of dealing with the end customer, taking their payment in, but at the time of booking, guarantee and also fund the merchant in full, then they are happy because that will keep business as usual for them. Pay in full, pay in invoice, there are all kind of variations to that. Layaway is slightly different. That's not a payment in full up front, but that's a payment over time, typically before the departure or arrival of the trip, arrival at the hotel. But that's also something that you see in some, originally, I think it comes from Australia, and you see it in other countries now as well. There are even initiatives around, where you can save now and pay later. And that means that you actually, you put money into kind of a wallet, and then at the time of booking, it's transferred to the merchant. So that's another alternative. Historically, in Latin America, for instance, installments, either by the issuer or by the acquirer. That means that either the merchants get paid in full and the issuer takes care of the individual installments, or by acquirer that also the merchant gets is charged or is funded by installment. And then there's some other initiatives like subscriptions, where you actually, I think there's some instances in North America and Canada as well, where you actually pay on a monthly basis and then you qualify for an X number of flights, for instance, per year. And you can then, redeem those flights during the course of the year. And I already mentioned the tour operator mechanism, where you do a partial payment at a time around or just after the time of booking, and then the remainder payment typically close before departure. Lots of new names in that space, if you look at the global map, but you also see that obviously Visa, MasterCard, and Express in their role as credit card already have done something similar, and they more and more also now offer like a pay in 3 or 4 to the customer through the issuers of the cards, right? So that's they also countering basically the development of buy now pay later providers, fintech providers, by more and more aggressively offering that themselves as well. So big in travel. Keep that in mind. By the way, it's not only spreading the payment, but you also typically see that because instead of paying $1,000 in one go, you pay it in 6 monthly installments. That, for instance, the basket value goes up because then maybe instead of economy, okay, let's try premium economy, or maybe just take instead of a standard room, a premium room, right? Because in the end, it feels like it's easier to digest the amount. It's a mental thing as well, right? Okay. So another, so we looked at let's say, suppliers selling directly, airlines selling directly, hotels, or maybe car rentals. But you see also like the travel intermediaries, the travel agencies, originally the let's say the brick and mortar, and since late 1990s, early 2000s, the Expedias of this world and Booking.coms of this world have, aggregated all that inventory from Expedia, airlines, hotels, booking hotels, and nowadays also like individually owned properties and rooms. And they have made that available through a nice user interface, and you can search, you can select, and you can book and you can pay. And what you see more and more is that it becomes more and more kind of a platform or marketplace. What we do know, obviously, from the retail, for instance, that the same mechanism is used by travel technology providers. They become basically travel fintech providers, where they actually combine the booking component with the pay-in component, but also with the payout component, because what a travel intermediary does, you can see it here in the diagram as well. Now they sell through different channels. They accept pay-ins from end customers, if it's corporate customers or if it's leisure customers, and they sell flights, they sell hotel rooms, they sell packages, etc. But they then accept a pay-in many different forms. They then hold on to that funds in a secure environment, in a wallet, and then depending on the outcome of the business rule, they will then decide when and how to move money from themselves to the supplier. And that can differ quite a bit. It can be an account to account, can be wallet to wallet, can be a virtual card, for instance, that is created on the fly, and can also be, in the future, for instance, a stable coin. Can also be an invoice, right? That the hotel in the end, sends an invoice to the travel agency to collect the money that they have collected upfront. What you see more and more is that, and Booking.com, by the way, is a good example. Payment by Booking, probably 10 years ago, only a very small portion of the payments were prepaid and were handled by Booking.com. I think it's now more than 2/3, right? And we're talking about 1 million plus bookings a day. So that's really massive. But the convenience of basically having the checkout at the time of booking, having multiple forms of payment, having local forms of payment available, having also timelines available to pay over time, that really has added a lot of convenience for the traveler. Because, for instance, with hotels, they're typically limited. If they would accept payment at a check-in, it will be limited to the forms of payment accepted by the local bank that they have in the terminal from, right? So, and a booking can offer all kind of online payment methods as well. So there's a lot of value in bringing this together, having that embedded finance, as it's called, in place to further structure, streamline, the money flow between the end customer and the supplier. But then similar to what is happening in digital space, in the retail space, from a platform or a marketplace model. Okay. I think we're going quite fast, so that's good. So one of the key topics, if I look back at the last couple of years, probably the last 5 to 6 years, is the evolution of the payment gateway. That's, to a large extent, is not, I would say, travel specific, but there are definitely elements in there that, especially with airlines, for instance, that I'll get back to in a minute. But I recently created this overview, and you might recognize the format because it's also a metro map or a tube map, I think what I see in especially I would say, tier 1 airlines and online travel agencies that have a regional or even a global footprint, that work through multiple channels, that are reliant on multiple Visa and MasterCard acquirers, not only from a risk or processing perspective, but also, for instance, with local versus regional or global providers. They need to accept a wide range of local/alternative forms of payment. That role of the gateway has evolved from pretty straightforward in the 2000s to more sophisticated, a bit more advanced, in the 2010s, to now quite sophisticated, very sophisticated in the 2020s, especially also in the second box at the bottom, in a bit orangey like, is like there's so many other value-added services or even hygiene factors like around data security, like tokenization, but also like how to manage currencies, for instance, how to reconcile all these different forms of payment. That role of payments has become more and more important. Not only, by the way, and that's if you see at the bottom left, to reduce costs or to optimize costs or to grow conversion, to have, dynamic routing in place, to do very smart things to, in the end, have the checkout conversion as high as possible. But also, for instance, and that's a lesson learned from the pandemic, is to not have all your eggs in one basket, for instance, with one acquirer. If that acquirer, especially in travel, the appetite for travel, across acquirers differs quite a bit and can change. Well, maybe not overnight, although that happened in 2020 when the pandemic hit. But definitely, it's not a given that, for instance, a particular acquirer will remain open for business for travel for the next 5 or 10 years. That might change if there's a change in strategy or maybe even leadership. That might change, in maybe 3-6 months, and then it's very welcome that you already have fallback options, or you can route transactions such a way that the business continuity is not at risk. Another element, obviously, of payment orchestration is, especially in travel, is how to optimize the cash flow, make sure that funds flows as smoothly and as fast as possible through the system and ends up in your account. That's always good for reporting and your financials, and obviously also by embracing this multi-partner, multi-channel, multi-acquirer strategy, you also introduce a lot of fragmentation from a back office perspective. Not only if it's refunding, but definitely if it's reconciliation or support. And so there's more and more a need for a harmonization layer in the middle that can absorb a lot of that complexity. Also to be more agile, to reduce the time to market as well. Mainly from a technical perspective, because what you see on the right-hand side and also at the top, the merchant onboarding, there's still a lot of responsibility that still remains with the merchant, especially in the money flow, because that's not what payment orchestration does, but also in the onboarding and the support. That's mainly in the domain of the merchant, and but that's also good to realize. That's also one of the reasons for this diagram, that yes, orchestration is very important. It can help in a lot of cases, but there's also a head and a tail that should also be part of your overall payment strategy and payment architecture as well. On the right-hand side, 2 more boxes. I'm involved every now and then also on the RFP side, so that's a bit my mindset there. How to select a payment orchestrator that's a good fit with your business model, with your size, with your requirements, and obviously you want them to be agnostic, so that you still, as a merchant, determine how transactions are routed, which value-added services are triggered, that kind of stuff. But also they need to be flexible, and robust, like that they have a you can actually for the longer term commit to working, because they will represent a very important part of your technical infrastructure as well. And then obviously the selection criteria depends very much on the merchant side. If you're domestic, if you're regional, if you're global, what do you sell? But pricing and coverage and compliance, there's many things to consider. I won't mention all the 500 line items on an RFP to you here, but it is definitely becoming more important. But it's also, like I said in the beginning, an evolution of the payment gateway, and from an individual merchant perspective, look at what you're trying to achieve there. Do you want to use them as a super, let's say, gateway to unlock certain opportunities or go away some pain points, or do you really want a payment orchestration to be overarching as a single point of entry and exit for all your payment transactions, which helps a lot, by the way, with optimizing the setup and monitoring. Okay. I'll take a sip of water. Maybe if there are any questions, this is the moment. No? Okay, let's continue. Okay, so we looked at a bit of the landscape, who's playing in that space. I mentioned there's historically a lot of legacy technical infrastructure or architecture and systems and policies and procedures in place. Probably about a year 10 ago, I mean, there was like, oh my God, no, we now have something called blockchain, and that's going to take all our pain away. That's going to be the silver bullet. And there've been a number of initiatives since, in the travel space, but it is definitely a good fit from a blockchain technology. And I'm not claiming to be an expert, by the way, but I was at an event 2 weeks ago, organized by Camino Network and Chain for Travel, and it's good to see what's happening in that space. I must admit that I think the network covers currently some 200, if I'm right, use cases, and payment is one of them. So there's a lot of others as well. From creating an offer to creating a booking, to basically letting the supplier know that the reservation is guaranteed, but also moving money. Right, and that's something that where you then enter into, okay, how do you do that? Well, maybe 10 years ago the idea was, oh, let's do that with cryptocurrency. That never really materialized because of all the the volatility of crypto and other let's say lack of regulation. But we do see now that where it maybe first was central bank digital currencies like issued by central banks. Now you see that there's a huge growth in attention, especially, but also development and funding into stablecoins. So that's probably the next stop. And what I've learned from the conference as well is that some of the merchants were speaking there, to put all your eggs in one basket and go to only offer crypto or stable. That's given the long cycles in the industry, and it will need a lot of time to shift over. So some kind of hybrid period will have to be entered. So you see now that some of the front runners in accepting crypto, in travel agencies, for instance, are now offering next with also like fiat or legacy forms of payment, so that the chance of people making the booking and checking out goes up. I'm always people ask me like, yeah, we have this use case of a DJ that wants to rent a private jet for a gig in Ibiza, and they want to pay with crypto. We need crypto acceptance. Yeah, you have to ask yourself, how often will this happen, and is it worth the investment? Some of the online travel agencies, some airlines as well, by the way, invested early on, got a lot of PR, a lot of marketing out of it, but never really materialized a lot of transactions. So, but with a new focus on stablecoin, I'm really curious to see what's happening. Obviously, like I said in the beginning, in any business to business and in a travel agency paying a supplier, my view is always trying to find a middle ground, trying to find a balance so that it works for both sides and not only for one and not the other. And for instance, where the use of virtual cards comes with a rebate for the travel agency, so they get kind of a kickback commission out of that. That can be built into blockchain as well, but it's not a standard feature. But and if you promote it as like very ultra low cost, then yeah, low cost also means also low value. So in the end, what kind of support, what kind of protection, what kind of incentive can you get out of it, and find the middle ground there, so that both sides of the equation can work together in a good way. Okay. So we're not there yet, but I thought I'd start drawing like what could it look like, if a travel agency would actually pay an airline with stablecoin. And I'm learning on the go, like probably 99.9% of the people in the industry. If you're not fully into it, then it's still quite a mystery. But it's quite interesting to see. And I did some workshops recently around the use of stablecoins in the airline industry, and my experience is that where it's US dollar to US dollar, where it's high volume, where it's already robust and cost friendly, those won't be the first to disrupt. But there are definitely use cases where a good example is always like Argentina, with high volatile currencies. Or maybe countries where it's very difficult to get money out of the country if you sell as an airline. Those are probably the first to be addressed. And I think I saw a question. Let me see. I'm curious, can I see that?
Paul, the question is, do you have any idea of the percentage of payments done with stablecoins in the travel industry?
No, the short answer is no. But I also know that it's all in experimental phase. It's like a test tube at the moment. So the discussions are definitely ongoing to see, what use cases would apply. But there are very many variables in the equation from trust from a regulatory perspective, from standardization. So yes, there are definitely some online travel agencies already accepting crypto and also experimenting, let's say, with stable coins. But it's very early days, right? So, but yeah, obviously the market is looking closely at it, and I'm aware that it has a lot of potential. But it will also, like you see here, a lot of let's say pieces of the puzzle have to come together and have to prove themselves. So it's going to be very exciting times to see how it will come out. But I've seen and heard too many times, when there was a new initiative like, oh, the card schemes will be, out of business in a year. No, they will also. You already see, by the way, that card schemes have worked together with crypto exchanges to you put a debit card in the middle, so you can actually pay with a debit card, which is in the background funded from a wallet. In a cryptocurrency. So I think initially there will be the challenge will be to find ways to leverage the technology without disrupting too much the ecosystem. Because if you want to do that, that's going to be a very long-term thing. That's going to be 10, 20, 30 years, if to reach scale for that. Okay, do we have more? Was that the only question?
For now, but anyone who has questions, pop your hand up, shoot it in the chat.
We have about 10, 15 minutes to go, so I think we have time for questions. Don't be shy, feel free.
Question actually is not related to this, so I will keep it for a little later.
Okay, but don't forget to ask it. So the key thing here, like I said, is that I'm just imagining, I know, maybe in Argentina where travel agency is selling a local currency in pesos, and the airline would like to be funded in USDC, for instance, or in dollars, because they don't want to keep the highly volatile currency and run the risk of devaluation. Then obviously a local exchange needs to take the risk on that. They need to take in the pesos and convert them into, for instance, USDC in a stable coin, so that the money can then move from the agency wallet to the airline wallet, and then the airline can then off-ramp it, so can convert it back to fiat, for instance, to dollars. So then from an airline perspective, that's pretty low risk. But in the end, I think the travel agency will have to pay the risk, the conversion fee, the risk fee on the on-ramping. So I'm not claiming to be an expert. I mean, I'm just trying to see what's happening on a very high level, but it's definitely interesting. But there's also a lot of details that still need to be figured out. So it's going to be exciting. Okay. The other big topic before we go to the questions and then my wrap up is you can't open your phone, open your desktop, read the paper, and it's all about AI in general, and definitely also a lot about agentic commerce. So using an AI agent to actually act on your behalf, and in this particular use case, then select a product or a trip or a flight, and then also with your approval, then also complete the booking and complete the payment, right? And there's a lot of every newspaper I read, every post I see on LinkedIn, there's so much information now, and so it's very hard to say exactly, what the summary is or where it will go to. But I put on the left and right hand side, some entries, some angles into it that still need to be further explored, right? So one thing, for instance, what I hear and see a lot is that to have the AI agent act on your behalf, and also for the merchant to accept the search, the booking, the payment, that it needs to be rock solid from a security perspective, right? It needs to be authenticated to that there's really a person behind it, that AI agent is acting on behalf of that person, and that that AI agent is also allowed to access, for instance, the inventory and also making the booking and making the payment with the merchant. So I think every day there's news, there's new initiatives, there's a lot of attention given to it, there's a lot of funding going into it. It's a race, it's like an arms race, if you can call it like that. But there's still a lot of loose ends, that needs to be addressed. And we as an industry will have to sit through this and see how it will materialize and where it will end up. And I think the interesting thing is that we don't know yet, right? So let's have to wait and see. But that travel will be disrupted. I think with this, the industry agrees on that, but how it will work in practice and at what scale and who will be doing what and who will earn what, that's still a big question mark. I think we have some more questions.
We have some commentary. Distan, I hope I'm saying your name right, said, I think it also depends on the geography and regulations, Micah or Genius. Carla then said, many regulated banks in Latin America are starting to accept savings accounts in crypto and local currency. And Victor noted, Pix now is now processing payments in stablecoins in Argentina. Carla replied, but all this creates a lot of friction. And the question is, how would the compliance be taken care of if we use AI for automating payments as it's a PI?
That's why I also used all these bullet points here. That is a lot of things to consider. And compliance, obviously, we've made steps forward as an industry with European regulations, with US regulations, and I'm pretty sure like in UAE and Singapore and others, there are also regulations. But in the end, you have to navigate all of those. And as a merchant, you have to address quite a lot of things like the technology, the legality, the compliance, the cost. It's going to be a steep learning curve. And I don't claim to have all the answers, obviously, because probably after this hour, if I open my mailbox, there's more news about it. So I'm just trying to follow it, somewhat from a distance. But I would say stay engaged and try to educate yourself and join conversations, but let's not make the same mistake as what happened to like the initial crypto bubble, that people completely get sucked into that bubble and speak their own language, speak very fast, and don't understand why the rest of the world does not understand what they're saying. Because try to keep it at such a level that it's also let's say non-specialists can also at least grasp the concept and understand the what's going to happen, because otherwise it will remain very small. I think that won't happen with this, but I saw it with crypto that it didn't really take off. It didn't scale, right? And not saying that with stablecoin it won't, because I think for most people they will now recognize that, because there's like a fiat, there's more a real life connection to it, which backed by fiat currencies or by bonds or that kind of stuff. So it feels more, I guess my feeling is that it feels more natural and more real life than cryptos, which for overall majority of people were just hard to understand, what the value was of it. I think we have another question here.
You do. Which third-party integrations do you think are the most important for a B2B payments issuer to offer in order to be competitive? For example, GDS, ERPs, etc.
Typically I would say depends obviously how you book travel. But if you're typically there's either a global distribution system, a GDS, so like a global marketplace, which brings all the inventory of the airlines, hotels, cruise, etc. together. And whereas travel agents, you can make bookings and also put together packages, but you see more and more also, let's say, aggregators that like bed banks or flight aggregators that pull together resources, inventory from different sources, and then make them together. And if you're as an agent, you're linked to a GDS or to one of those aggregators, then typically they have a built-in functionality to issue cards for different scenarios, right? Currency, the credit line, that kind of stuff. So that's typically where you plug in as an issuer, so that the travel agency on a booking by booking level can then determine which type of card and what value and when will be, let's say, activated. You can configure it on the spot and then make it part of the booking to be charged directly or later. So yeah, you definitely have to hook into the travel technology, the booking and reservation layer. That's typically where that happens. And or to the travel agencies, if it's separate from that, then they will connect to the global distribution system, and in a separate integration, they will then connect to the issuer to pull the virtual cards in that they then use for payment to the supplier. But B2B is definitely a topic by itself, so I don't think we have time for that for a lot of detail. But if you go, by the way, and I'll that's how I wrap up. But go to my website. There is an awful lot of additional information there that will probably help you get started.
I want to add one question that I have seen some initiatives related to connecting carbon credits to loyalty programs and payment related in the travel industry. Is this still part of the programs you see or the initiatives you see?
How do I give a political neutral answer to this? Yeah, let me try to summarize that. I think that the focus on that has reduced somewhat.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not top of mind anymore. I mean, I still see SAF credits or carbon emission credits, that kind of stuff. But I think also the airlines have probably realized now that they probably have. It's not to score points is not the top priority anymore. It's my personal opinion.
Yeah. The discussion shifts.
Yeah, and then you have to be flexible there as well and go with the waves, right? It changes. We have a couple of minutes left, so let me just maybe summarize a little bit of what we discussed, and there's so much more, but we have to pick some. So yes, in the travel industry, you have like multiple layers. You as a customer, you can pay directly, to a supplier, but it can also be a sequence of events where, there's multiple travel agencies, suppliers, sub-suppliers, are present there. And there's a wide range of elements, of factors that play a role. Obviously, we just talked about innovation. We talked about credit risk, like consumer protection plays an important role. But also like the car schemes, the industry, the fraud plays well. So there's so many things, and my advice is, there's definitely with travel fully back and more after the pandemic, there's a lot of need for payment processing capacity, but take time to invest in it and to understand the complexities and nitty-gritty, the dependency on partners and compliance and risk and that kind of stuff, because it's too complex to just do it on the side and to hope for the best. I've seen too many vendors, payment providers being burned by it. So invest in your organization, into your knowledge, into your partner relationships, your technology, and make a good attempt at it, and not try it. Oh, it's a quick win. Let's do it, because that's from a fraud and credit risk and data security perspective. I would not advise that. So that's a bit the roundup for today, and maybe just to do a final roundup. So on my website here, I have like 45 different infographics now. There are like newsletters. I share an awful lot on LinkedIn as well. Whatever is relevant, what I think is relevant, I'll share, and also my own content, also third-party content. So please do have a look there if you're interested in the topic. And you can also contact me on the email address below.
Amazing. Really comprehensive, amazing. I think that a lot of food for thought, and for all the aspects and all the parts of the industry, the segment of travel payments. so many fintechs could be created even today just from this conversation.
We just
Really.
scratched we scratched the surface, but
Yeah.
I always say, Alicia, no, if it was simple, I would not be sitting here. Yeah, no,
Probably none of us.
no. I think we have.
That's amazing. I'm sure we will get follow-up questions coming from this after the call.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it, and thank you for sharing
Okay.
also your contact information. See you
You're
soon.
welcome. Okay.
Thank you, everybody that
Have a nice day.
participated for joining
Bye-bye.
us. Thank you. Bye-bye.